Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Hannah and let's talk books. Can you believe we are already at the end of January? Like, in 2 days, it's February. I know this is going up February 1st, but still. When people say the older you get, the faster time goes, it is 100% true, and I 100% hate it. So anyway, I read 7 books, I think it was, this month. I tried to read 9, however 2 of those were DNFs, so we're starting out strong in the DNF area. In fact, the very first book I read this month ended up being a DNF, and that is The 7 Moons of Maali Almeida by Shehan Karunatilaka. And I did look up how to pronounce that. This is historical fiction, magical realism, LGBTQ+, so a lot of genres going on here. This just came out the end of last year, and like I said, I did not finish this. I think I got about 150 pages in. So basically this book starts out with Maali Almeida, who wakes up in the afterlife, and everything is just like complete chaos. He's basically in like a purgatory of sorts. A fellow ghost who he kind of knows, I think he knows the name of, but not them like personally, tries to get him to remember how he died because he wants to take vengeance on the people that murdered the both of them. So this was actually my pick for the local book club I'm in. It ended up winning, and so this was our pick for January. However, I instantly regretted it because I did not know that this book is written in second person, which I detest. I do not read things in second person at all. So when I opened that book and started reading, I was in for quite a shock. And on top of that, it was very, very hard to follow. It's almost written in like a stream of consciousness. And I tried looking up the importance of this or the significance of this and could find nothing. I even watched like several author interviews and this never came up, but there's a lot of broken English in this. And so I'm like, is that just how people in that area speak when they speak English? Or like, what is the reasoning here? I couldn't find anything about it. And mainly for this book, I feel like it's the same thing that happened with Haroun in the Sea of Stories by Salman Rushdie, I believe is the author there, where you have to know a lot of the history of this area and what has happened there to really understand what's going on. Because this is taking place during like a lot of civil unrest and all these groups are like murdering each other kind of thing. And so there's a lot of talk of politicians, wars that have happened in this area that I know nothing about. And so since I didn't understand the significance of these groups, these people, I just felt lost. And so since this is a 400-page book, and at 150 pages, I just wasn't into it. I had to stop. I was forcing myself through it because of the book club, but I feel like it really would have put me in a reading slump if I forced myself to finish it. And like every time I looked at it, I just did not want to pick it up. So I just DNF'd it in the end. Like, I feel like it's not anything against the book, but the style and just pretty much everything about it is just not for me. And I almost forgot to say, but this book takes place in Sri Lanka. It's a Sri Lankan author, so you definitely need to know history of that area. Next, I read Dancing on the Grave of a Son of a Bitch, the complete motorcycle betrayal poems by Diane Wakoski. So obviously, as the title says, this is a poetry collection. It is actually a combination of 2 books. One was published in 71, the other was published in 72. So this is like just all of her poems written during that time. However, this specific edition came out in 2022. And I gave this 3.5 stars. The author loved men that rode motorcycles and men with mustaches, so that's what a lot of these poems are about. And like you can tell from the title, like betrayal, obviously these people have wronged her in some way, although some of them are a lot more ambiguous than others. And this is pretty much just her venting all that out. So I feel like when you say the word poetry, most people are going to have a very specific version of poetry pop up in their mind. And for me, this really felt like individual short stories more than anything. Her poems are long. A lot of them are multiple pages. This isn't just like a tiny paragraph. It's written like a story almost. And there's no mistake, it's still poetry. It just isn't what you might first think when you hear that word. And on top of that, it became very repetitive since all of these are poems about her exes and how she's been wronged. It is pretty much the same thing over and over again. And there were 54 poems in here. So you can just imagine how annoying that got after a while. There were some hits for me here, and like I had it on my not Kindle. I always want to say Kindle, but it's just a tablet. So I was highlighting some passages that like stuck out to me and stuff. But in the end, I just felt really sad for this author. Like, she seemed to base her entire being and meaning in life around these men. And I just wanted to shout at her that men aren't that important. Next, we already have a contender for best book of 2023, and that is Briardark by S.A. Harrion. I almost said that very weird. S.A. Harrion. This is horror, sci-fi, mystery. This just came out on January 16th, and I gave this 5 stars. First 5-star of the year, and as of right now, it is my favorite book of the year. I know it's still January, so that's saying a lot, but like, this really scratched a horror itch for me. Okay, so I'm actually going to read the Goodreads summary for this book because I feel like that does it better than anything I could say. So it says, for Dr. Sienna DuPont and her ambitious team, the Alpenglow Glacier expedition is a career-defining opportunity. But 30 miles into the desolate Dead Switch wilderness, they discover a missing hiker dangling from a tree, and their satellite phone fails to call out. Then the body vanishes without a trace. The disappearance isn't the only chilling anomaly. Sienna's map no longer aligns with the trail. The glacier they were supposed to study has inexplicably melted. Strange foliage overruns the mountainside, and a tunnel within a tree hollow lures Sienna to a hidden cabin and a stranger with a sinister message. Holden Sharp's IT job offers little destruction from his wasted potential until he stumbles upon a decommissioned hard drive and an old audio file. Trapped on a mountain, Dr. Sienna DuPont recounts an expedition in chaos and the bloody death of a colleague. Entranced by the mystery, Holden searches for answers to Sienna's fate, but he is unprepared for the truth that will draw him to the outskirts of Dead Switch Wilderness, a place teeming with unfathomable nightmares and impossibilities. So for the longest time, I have been in the mood for like a really good Lost in the Woods, Haunted Woods, Something's Not Right in the Woods type of book, and this 100% delivered that for me. It really takes off quickly and never dies down. There's just so much crazy shit happening that's packed into this. Like, I really just can't get over how much the author was able to include in here, especially since this is actually a first book in a series. So, like, at the end, nothing's solidly answered, but you have so many hints and stuff. And there's a lot of like foreshadowing and stuff for what's going on. So, I mean, you're not left with nothing. So for me, it doesn't feel like it's a setup for book 2. It feels like this is a season 1. Now I'm waiting for season 2, which I feel like is how multi-book series, I don't know why I said it that way, which is how I think series should be. And this does one of my favorite things. You can craft theories throughout the entirety of the book as to what the hell is going on. I am a sucker for that. I love that. My top book last year was The Last House on Neela Street, and that allowed me to do that, which is why I think this is going to be definitely a favorite for this year. It is multi-POV, which I'm always iffy about, but it did not take away from the book. The characters do feel very like individual and have independent personalities, so it doesn't just all mush together kind of thing. And I do think after the first 50% of this book, some people might be a bit overwhelmed at how much is happening. So I wouldn't recommend this to someone that's just wanting like a chill, easy read kind of thing. And also, even in the description of this book, they compare it to House of Leaves, which is my favorite book of all time, and Lost, which I've never seen. I 100% get the House of Leaves vibes from this. I could definitely feel that throughout the entire book. So my comparison would be House of Leaves, but the Netflix show Dark, if you've seen that, it's a German show. I feel like it's a combination of those. So for me, I think every horror fan should be picking up this book, especially if you want some spooky, fucked up shit happening in the woods kind of thing. Definitely pick this up. If you loved House of Leaves, pick this up. Like, I actually made some posts on Reddit about this book because, like, I have not heard of this anywhere. I've only seen this on NetGalley. I haven't seen anyone mentioning this book. Nothing. Since I love it so much, I'm just really recommending it to everyone at the moment, and I absolutely cannot wait for the second book. Next, I read Daisy by Colin Lorimer. This is a horror graphic novel, which was originally comics, but then they just put them all into one graphic novel book. This came out in 2022, and unfortunately, I gave it 2 stars. And for my summary here in my notes, I literally just have, lol, I don't know, because I really have no idea what was going on in this book. It's like kind of about Nephilim, which is a cross between humans and angels. But in this world, the Nephilim are giants. And so, like, we're following what is presumed to be an angel who has a Nephilim with him named Daisy. And they're, like, going on this holy crusade kind of thing, but she's trying to thwart him. But everything happens so fast. And, like, I thought this was a first volume of a series going into it. So when I finished it, even though I didn't fully understand what was going on, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be more fleshed out in the other volumes. So I'll find out more as I go through the series kind of thing. So I was like, yeah, this was fine. This was good. And then I found out this is the entirety of the story since it originally started out as comics. There's nothing else past this. And then I got angry because it's like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, what is this story? I don't understand what happened. I don't understand Daisy. Like, I have no idea what is happening here. So yeah, it went from being a 4 stars for first volume to being 2 stars since this is a completed series. The art in here, though, is insanely impressive and so brutal. Like, there's some full page spreads of some, like, battle scenes, and I was just, like, holding the book open, just staring. Like, it is crazy. However, the story just completely drops the ball here, and I really have no idea what the fuck happened in the end. Next, I read a book that I've been seeing everywhere on Book Talk, and that is not Book Talk, BookTube. Don't mind me. But that is We Spread by Ian Reid, and this is a horror mystery. This did just come out last year. I actually thought it was an older book, but it is not, and I gave it 4 stars. So this follows Penny, who's been living in, like, the same apartment for the past 50 years, and she starts seeing and hearing odd things, but then she has an accident that sends her to this assisted living facility. It took me a second to think of that. And so she's there with, like, 3 other of her peers, and odd things continue to happen, and it causes her to question, like, is her memory failing? Is she dreaming? Is this reality? Like, she's really confusing what is real and what's not. And so she's starting to think there might be something more sinister happening here. So the concept of this book is something I think almost everyone fears, and that's aging, and not just aging, but losing your memory, losing who you are, losing yourself. I had a grandfather who had Alzheimer's, so I understand what that looks like and how that can affect someone and how that can make them angry and things of that nature. So I feel like this book is just playing on a very, very real fear. And so this is a book that you can interpret multiple ways. There are conversations that you will hear between characters in here that can go a sinister way, but can also be completely innocent. And since our narrator is so unreliable, you really can't even trust what she's hearing or seeing or anything that's really happening. Everything is just so up in the air for this book, and I love it. Question everything, and you really just don't know the answer in the end. So definitely don't read this if you need definite answers, because you're not gonna get it here. This is a super quick read. Like, I was shocked at how short it was when I picked it up, and the font in it is really, really big as well. So, like, it's so quick to go through. You can easily read it in one sitting kind of thing. And it's interesting. I loved it. It's a bit of it's not really a wild ride, but my God, you will be questioning every single thing people are saying in here and doing kind of thing. So this is definitely another one that I would recommend to horror lovers. I cannot talk anymore. Next, I read Mothered by Zoya Stage. I keep wanting to pronounce it Stage because that's how you would say it in French, but it's not, it's Stage. And this is a horror thriller. This comes out March 1st of this year. I received this as an e-arc through NetGalley, and I gave this 2.5 stars. The main character we follow here is Grace, and it's the pandemic. And so she loses her job, and obviously bills become tight. So she lets her mother move in with her to try to lighten the load a bit. And her and her mother have never had a very good relationship, and this situation will really show Grace why. So I have actually had this e-arc since July of last year, but I just wanted to read it closer to the release date, and I still feel like I read it a little bit early. So I have forgotten all about this book, so I didn't realize until I picked it up again that this is the author of Baby Teeth, which I've never personally read, but I've watched enough reviews of it to know that I would absolutely hate that book. It's basically about a child that is pure evil. So that really had me a bit nervous going into this. And as you can tell by my rating, it wasn't the best by the end. So right away in the beginning, there's an author's note talking about how this book did not start out as a pandemic book. And so because of that, it's not a huge part of this book. However, I have to disagree with that. The pandemic is basically a character in this book because everything that happens, like all the situations they're put into, is because of the pandemic. Her mom would not be moving in with her if the pandemic didn't happen. It is what moves the plot and puts the characters in their places and makes their mental states what they are. So like, with all of that happening, I don't think it's fair to say the pandemic isn't a big part of this book. So this book is subtle horror, which I usually enjoy. I love a slow build up to where things escalate before coming to a head kind of thing. So there is this build up of like tension, anger, confusion. And because of this, I didn't mind that it was like a slow plot. However, you do expect a payoff, but that didn't happen. Instead, the last few chapters feel so rushed compared to the entire rest of the book. And we have entire personality changes that just happen overnight. And it comes out of nowhere and makes no sense. And there's a scene that I really just don't understand what the point of it was, why it was there, why was it happening? Like, we get absolutely no answers and it feels so fucking random. I'm just like, what? So pretty much I enjoyed 80 to 90% of this book, but then that last 10 to 20% just completely sucked my enjoyment out of reading it and made it a disappointment in the end, and I hate saying that. So I really feel like this book is going to be a bit niche in the end, because if you do not like dream sequences, no plots, and a pandemic setting, you will not like this book. There are a ton of dream sequences. This book really doesn't matter in the end, and like the pandemic is a huge part of it. Like, it is what it is. Next, I read Wily Writers Presents Tales of Evil by Angel Lee McCoy. This is a horror anthology. I also read this as an e-arc. However, it did come out at the end of last year, and I gave this 3 stars. So these are 11 stories, which you can tell by anthology, by all different authors spotlighting evil. However, some of these stories follow the prompt better than others. Like, I really was expecting something that I was going to be shocked at. I really thought they were going to delve into the evil parts of humanity, and I felt a lot of these stories stayed very surface level, and there was one where I even felt like it's mental illness. It's not the person being evil, that's mental illness. And so it just felt a bit weird in some of the stories. And as per anthologies, I had a 1-star story in here and a 5-star story in here. It was just one of each. Everything else was really in the middle. It's definitely a variety, and I think this is probably the most eclectic collection of stories I've ever read. They were so different from each other. You could get whiplash from it. Like, I was really shocked at the jump we would take between stories. But yeah, basically overall, I was really looking forward to a sinister vibe, and this didn't exactly deliver that. However, the average of all the stories for me was a 3.45, so it is on par with most anthologies and short story collections that I've read. Next, I tried to read Sleeping Beauties Volume 1 by Rio Ewers, which I did look up how to say that last name, and Allison Sampson. This is a horror graphic novel that came out in 2020, and unfortunately I DNF'd this pretty early on. So this is based on Stephen and Owen King's book of the same name. I had never heard of it before, but basically I just saw this in my library's graphic novel section. Same with Daisy, really. I just went over to the graphic novel section. These were just some of the ones being displayed, I think, actually. And the covers caught my eye, and then like seeing that this one was based on a Stephen King book, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So without even really like reading the descriptions, I grabbed them kind of thing. But in this, women go to sleep and never wake up, and some like weird cocoon like web substance develops over like their head, and if people like rip that open and wake them up, then the women are just like enraged and like murdering everything around them kind of thing. Pretty much, I wasn't a fan of anything here. We were jumping through so many characters right away. Like, I just could not keep track of what was going on, and I did not like the art style. I really didn't like it. I liked the cover. I think the cover's pretty, but I did not like any of the art inside. And since I had no idea what the hell was happening, I was just like, yeah, this isn't for me, and just put it down right away, pretty much. Then I read Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. This is a literary horror / magical realism book. This does not come out until March 7th of this year, so this was another e-arc I received through NetGalley, but I am giving this 4 to 4.5 stars. It's just in that range kind of thing. So this book is about a couple who loses their child. Like, it's literally the first sentence of the book, their child dies. And he had a condition where he only had one lung. So the mom actually opens him up and takes a piece of that lung. And she returns home to Mexico. Is it Mexico City though? I think it's a suburb of Mexico City if I'm not mistaken. And she hears this story from the housekeeper, actually, of how someone planted like their loved one's heart and it grew into another person kind of thing. Like, they would feed it and stuff. And so she starts feeding this lung and it turns into Monstrilio. So this book was so different from what I was expecting. I requested it months ago, and I don't like reading the descriptions after I've forgotten them. I want to go in as blind as possible. But all the tags on this were horror. It didn't say literary horror. It just said horror. So I was thinking it was going to be something a bit different. And there was even an article calling this a haunted house book. Like, what the hell are you talking about? There's absolutely no haunted house here. So I don't know what is going on with the labeling of this book, but it's not very accurate. This is literary horror, which I struggle with the definition of the word literary. When I tried looking up literary horror, there was actually a lot of definitions contradicting themselves. But basically, this is a very, very beautifully written book, especially the first 50%. It's my favorite part of the book. It's so fucking gorgeous. That has horror elements, but not in the way you might expect. It's more that there are some gruesome things happening. There is a lot of mentions and dealing with grief, loss of a loved one. It's very the human emotions and how we deal with them kind of book. And so the first 50% of this book was 100% 5 stars for me. Unfortunately, right at that mark, we do like a 2-year time skip, which caught me so off guard. I did not understand what was happening at first, and it took me like almost 10 pages to understand whose perspective I was in and what was going on, because we do change perspectives. It's multiple POV. But when we switch a perspective, we never go back to that person. So it's not something that keeps flip-flopping. But I just had so much confusion with the time skip. And I really wasn't enjoying the story as much after. So that's why for me, it's just a 4 to a 4.5, because I did love that first 50% so freaking much. Like, it is perfection to me. And one thing I didn't realize until after I read this book is you could also label this as LGBTQ+, because every single character in this book you could label as queer. Like, no one is 100% straight here. It's actually quite interesting, and it's not something that's ever addressed. Like, there's never anyone going like, oh, you're bisexual or you're a lesbian, or anyone like conflicted about their sexuality or anything. There isn't any talk of that. It's just who the characters are. So I would definitely recommend this to someone who really just wants to read something gorgeous, something beautiful, and doesn't mind that it looks pretty much into these people's souls, like into their grief and their love. And personally, I would have rather it focused more on Monstrilio's transformation and how they kind of like incorporate him into the world, but that's what happened during the time skip. So we don't really see as much of his transformation from, I guess, monster to man as I personally would have liked, but obviously that's the author's decision. And that's everything I read and attempted to read for January. Currently, I am actually reading How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I almost said How to Buy a Haunted House, which would be kind of funny too. I'm actually doing a reading vlog on this right now, and I will either finish this today or tomorrow. We're actually going to a concert tonight, so it kind of depends on how much time I have tonight to read this. So I will probably technically finish this in January, but I mean, I have to film this at some point to be able to edit it in time. So this will probably just end up into February's. But the one thing I will say about this is it's 100 pages too long. Like, I hit a part where it would have been the perfect spot to end this, and instead there's 100 more pages to go, and I'm just like, I'm tired of reading this. So yeah, I can't really say if I like it or not yet. But that's everything. So as always, thank you for hanging out with me. It is always appreciated. And until next time, bonne journée and au revoir.